Should be live. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. How heaven has been humanized. And and what if eternal beings are living here? Okay. So I would start off the idea by saying that the human being has a geometry. There's two components to it. There's the human and then there's the being. The human part, the geometry is given. And even though we're under the impression that human beings create shape, but the concept of creation is not created. The concept of death cannot die. And what is death? What is death? If there are eternal beings here, that means there has been no such thing as death. That means that there is an eternal mind that responds and engages to this reality, a mind that doesn't fear, a mind that doesn't die, a mind that doesn't have shape. All of human values, all of the human being is everything has to do with shape. So human beings have taken the idea of heaven, which is a shapeless place. Oh man. The idea of the human being has been branded on everything, on people, on objects, on subjects, and finally the unknown. And in some sense, the idea of heaven is man's inner life in the unknown. To continue, sorry guys, my attention's a bit multiple places at the same time. Really what the idea is I was wondering that if eternal beings are living here, it would be a completely different implication than the psychological strategy that temporary beings are making. And it's as if we're in the right world but in the wrong attitude. You know, there's moments in life where the mind convinces you that something is the right decision, and then you see it wasn't the right decision. There's moments where the mind makes you feel you're a king, you know, and then there's moments it makes you feel like you're a peasant, and then, you know, moments where it changes you, makes you realize that you're never what you're convinced by, because it all changes anyways. But it's not all, you know, it's like, even though there are many views of life, you can look at it and be like, why did 4.5 billion years of evolution for a creature just to realize its suffering, pain, and how bad how messed up everything and weird everything is? And I was like, no, 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 evolution has deeper plans, deeper visions. We're not a creature that is just the idea of time is the entrance of the future, the entrance of other realities. Man's fragmentation, psychological ability to fragment and classify reality. It's a tool. Every being has been given a tool. You know, even in religious books, they say God has given you a mind to use, as if God was like, yo, first check if you can't solve the problem and then ask, you know, in the sense that, you know, I mean, when I talk about religion, and of course I understand there's something beautiful in religious texts, where monotheistic religious texts, where it says only God knows what's in your heart. That means not no one beside you, not even your family members, can know what's in your heart. That means there's a hidden world that you're walking in that only you and the unknown witness are seeing. Now, anyways, the point of this episode is for me to explain how man's mind is shaping the world around him in accordance to his own design. And so the ability of an advanced human being is not per se to just be human, but to notice where the human being is happening, as if you thought that the human being was the only thing happening, and you suddenly see it's an instrument among many instruments, and it's the melody and in some sense the orchestra of many universes, many realities happening at the same time. Many are working together without knowing they are together. And the world goes on, you know. I was having a conversation with a friend about, in some sense, smoking and all this, and I was like, yo, who knows, you know, maybe every person who's being a smoker is genetically like preparing our lungs, you know, for like some messed up toxic thing in the future. Who knows? I mean, reality, something is very obvious, that it's so smart to this world that it's already preparing for its next step while human beings are trying to figure out where they are. So it makes sense that when you look at ancient traditions, they wanted to have a relationship with the force that was administering their world. You see, religion is not a bizarre idea when you actually treat the world as intelligent. What they have done is actually like, this is I mean it's not an error, you know. You can't say, you know, one phase of history is right or wrong, because everything, all geometry, it's kind of like recycles weirdly. You know, the seasons pass. Something that was right 100 years ago, you know, 100 years later is wrong, then 100 years later is right, you know. You know, I was like, yo, I'm gonna get, like, you know, likes and dislikes on my videos. I was like, yo, it's not that, it's just the centuries, the generations, all the different minds, you know. And I'm very privileged to be the first in my ancestry to actually be capable of communicating and speaking to a global space, a global stage, to speak on a global stage. Right, because really, in reality, there's been many moments where I have asked myself, oh, whoever I am, or whatever I am, what are you doing here? And in those moments, I have realized that I don't know. And the I don't know moments, when I was young, they would hate, I would hate it. I would hate that somebody knew something I didn't, you know. But as I grew older, I realized how precious were those moments where I was not convinced on what the world had to be, so it took that shape. Rather, I cared to see the real world. Imagine this world is not lifeless, it is an ancient friend, and you have come to meet the world, and the ancient friend needs your help. But what the help what the help that the ancient friend needs is conscious calibration and organization. Let me tell you what's going on here on this planet. Creatures have evolved to such a degree that they have the potentials of now demonstrating complex movements, just like a child grows up, right? The child can't walk, the parents help it, right? And then the child like grows up and is doing parkour all around buildings and whatnot. So what does that mean? That means it's like assistance required for a certain level, then the capacity and the advancement is there. And this is really what humanity has been doing in the sidelines of the transcendental. You know, beyond the veil of the senses, beyond what your senses promise you, beyond the desires of your humanism, you will realize that it's not a human being here. It is the presence of all that ever was. You know, it has nowhere to go. History has nowhere to go, and forever it will elude us thinking that it's going forward, but it has nowhere to go. Truth, God, reality, all that you are seeking, it has nowhere to go. That is the idea of truth being here. And so, you know, I was thinking, like, yo, what if the truth of humanity is not human? What would we do then? That means my whole life I'm conditioned to think like a human being, like a professional human being, you know, expert human being, trying to keep my human format all the time. But what if the truth is not even human? What if the truth is present as space? What if it's a field of activity and the particles in the that are moving finally notice it? What if all human beings have a rhythmic ability? What if there's a rhythm behind our eyes? What if what is moving us is not an idea or an object, and it is not even an event, and your emotions have given you great films, but they are not? Man, when he realizes he's not an objective entity, a great freedom finds him. When he realizes he's not a subjective entity, a greater freedom finds him. When he realizes he is not an entity, for what he is entitled to is the presence of all of reality, that what is the separation of man and God is in reality the idea that was found in the void. Do you see? All of this world is the attention of truth to itself. There's nothing here to fear, because the fear was created, and that which is here was prior to its creation. It's the idea of the infinite regress. It's the idea of the necessary existent in philosophy. It's the idea that, yo, who pushed the first domino, and it wasn't a domino that was first pushed. You see, it's the mind of reality. You know, for me, there was a time where, you know, even though I still, you know, claim myself to be a philosopher, but, you know, suddenly things changed, and I realized, oh my God, there's every person is claiming, every person is trying to own their way to the power that they want. But in some sense, who is the owner here? Is the owner you? The idea of you? Is it the idea of others? Is it what the human mind can generate? Or are we standing in a world that seems to be of design, incomprehensible design? Do you understand? Imagine your friend shows you like a Ferrari, like a new version of Ferrari, and you're like, yo man, you know, I've studied cars before, but this looks like a freaking spaceship. Yeah. It is incredibly cold here, guys, and I don't care. That's the strange thing. You know, it's not bothering me. Because you know what I have understood? I have understood. People are going to be like, Mr. Within, this is your ego speaking. I'll be like, no, what I've understood is about the ego. And what I have understood is that there is a part of us that has never made a mistake. And there's a part of us that seems to be endlessly making a mistake. And I was like, yo, did the soul make a sin? Like, yo, religion gives us this idea that we made a mistake and we're here. And I was like, no, the mistake is not, it's the mistake is thinking two separate dimensions are one. Do you understand? If we think of like, what do we see in this world, right? Even Vedic books, like, they acknowledge Earth as the bottom of the mountain mineral, and Earth is really this dimension. If somebody wanted to say what makes Earth different, a different plane of existence than other planes of existence, it's really how things are starting, being maintained, and ending. And in Vedic thought, they were like, yo, Brahman, Vishnu, Shiva. Vishnu was a maintaining force. So if you look at reality, you see that the thing that distinguishes this plane of existence is that these three things seem to be happening in one world, but that is the air. Okay, and the air of, and when I say air, you're going to be like, air for who? I'll say air for a multidimensional being. Why? Because these things can be separate dimensions. That means rather than us thinking we're in a world where we're born and we're going to like have a middle and an end, instead we think that there's a dimension where things are endlessly beginning. There's a dimension where things are endlessly being maintained. And there's a dimension where things are endlessly ending. Do you see the release of that, your attention? You see, so many things in life we think it's a problem, but the idea, anything that you think is a problem, is really what you haven't looked at yet. Because we're all given intelligence. I'm telling you, there was a time, some people say, they're not creative, they don't have imagination, and it's not really about that. It's about what freedom do you have when you look at this world. That means if instead of imagination, like it was like, imagine somebody like, put like a tight hula hoop around you and you couldn't move your arms, right? And then suddenly realizing you could move your arms. When it comes to man's inner realms, it's like that. It's not something that's new. It's something that's part of us, but I think we've forgotten to use it. Do you understand? It's like something that's happened with this idea of new souls entering the world. Is simply this idea that the new souls don't know how to maneuver the ancient vehicle. Do you know? And there might be, even through certain spiritualistic contexts, where people are going to be like, okay, it makes sense. Some beings have been here before, some beings haven't. Imagine, I've been to, sometimes I play, this video game called League of Legends, and I would go to an internet cafe until I bought my own computer. But I remember I would go to the internet cafe, and there would be some people who were like literally living there. I don't know if they were the owners or whatnot, right? But they were endlessly just living in that universe. And I realized like everything's a decision. The quality of our lives is really what our attention goes to. And nothing can hide its essence. Nothing can hide itself. This is the truth. This is why the honest, there's a value to honesty, because you're not multiplying yourself. Dishonest people are multiplying themselves, and then they got to remember all those selves that they are to different people, right? For me, I was like, yo, okay, to continue. Just the inspiration for this episode was that, yo, we're freaking out that we're gonna be these temporary beings that are gonna like end at some point. But what if they're beings right now that are like, we're like noobs to them, right? Thinking that there's death, and they're beings that are so advanced, they have lived through this world to such a degree that they have become a part of it. Because what else you can do? How long can you roam the world? Just think about it. Imagine you're just some conscious space of a being. How long can you individualize? Imagine you were an immortal for infinite time. At some point, you'd be like, yo, what am I doing walking? You know, as a body in a world, I'll just be the world itself, right? And that's what's happening. This is what I'm trying to bring into light for many people, where I'm saying, yo, humanity's reaching a point where its decisions have a capacity to dehumanize it, and because its decisions and its environment can dehumanize it, its greatest advantage is how it's being a human. Our greatest ability and advantage against the upcoming dehumanized realities is that we are the human. So to be human is a choice. And it's a beautiful choice. You know, right now we're living at a time people are like, yo, spiritual, I'm not my body. They're using spirituality as escapism, some people. But for some people it's actually real. They don't see themselves as a physical being. For me personally, 31 laps around the sun, if you ask me if I'm a physical being, I'll be like, nah, man. You know, simply because I have been watching my physical body change. So I've been like, okay, so there's a mind that's watching the body change, but I've also been watching my thoughts and ideas and what I've considered my mind change. So I am more like a being that's watching change, and I'm like, yo, if I identify with the change, I'm a temporary being, but if I'm just watching it, like, I'm not a temporary being. But what I've realized is that after some point, the concept of morality doesn't make sense. Morality is a on planet kind of dualistic notion. I mean, obviously it's dualistic, but what I'm saying, like, if we were eternal, there would be no good or bad beings. Sorry, I'll make it more graspable. If we were immortal, if nobody could die, like, who would be good or bad? You know, you could do something bad, but nothing happened. Nobody, it's like nobody lost anything. Imagine, like, nobody died. You know, it's like no human value. Like, there may come a time in the future where nobody can die, and there will be like, yo, we're bored. What do we do? You know? And somebody's gonna be like, yo, go subscribe to the Mr. Within YouTube channel. You know. Really, what it is every person is an energy, and you can have whatever idea on it, but this energy will do its thing. And the idea is, like, the cool thing is we can help with the coordination. I mean, so many of life is automated. You know, sometimes even though I do get like philosophical existential panic attacks sometimes, you know, but it's just so much of it is just automatically happening. Like, my heart is automatically beating, I'm automatically breathing. Believe it or not, I'm sometimes when I'm super when I'm like when I feel like I'm the whole moment, I can even the speech goes into automation. Many things can go into automation. This is literally the flow state. You know what's hilarious? People speak on YouTube, yo man, do this and that, and you'll get into the flow state, but it's the other way around. The flow state is happening all the time. We're not tuning into it. There are so many rhythms that the brain, like an antenna, can tune into, and you could ride these waves. Like the viewers might not notice, but I am literally with every episode like a surfer, where my attention is riding how the inner realms are bringing forth different landscape. And the inner realms moves, guys. It moves at different speeds. Like, you can notice it. You know, I can notice, like, I know my own speed of thinking. There's been moments where I've suddenly had a thought stream move in my inner realms at a speed where I was like, okay, this is not how I normally think. Right? So in those moments, I just watch. You know, I've learned that anything I don't understand, first I observe. And guess what? When human beings are born, they must observe themselves to develop, to advance. Like, all of us, that anybody who who's conscious and hearing me talk, like, you had to literally advance to be capable to hear this talk. And you know, these Mr. Within talks are just for this plane of existence. And I think what's going to happen is when the fear of the temporary goes away, there's going to come an incredible eternal staircase. They say a staircase to heaven. This might sound bizarre, but literally that staircase of heaven is not per se the staircase like a physical staircase, but it's the eon. I don't know how to say it. It's literally like every apocalypse, you know. I shouldn't say every apocalypse, but it's kind of like beings have different intentions. So that's the cool thing about this world. And you know, sometimes our minds may misinterpret the intentions of others, even. You know, sometimes it could be even just like a Sadhguru says, like like it could be the hormones thinking, like the hormone, the biological system putting the thought there rather than the person actually having the thought. I mean, what happens when we feel cold? Suddenly, the thought of a jacket comes. You know what I'm saying? So what it is our mind is like something that's living with us, and it sometimes, you know, I if somebody says, "Mr. Within, do you communicate with your mind?" I'll be like, not in the sense where I'm like, "Yo, mind, what's up?" and the mind's like, "Yo, what's good, man?" It's like not like that. You know, the way I have understood how if somebody was like, okay, let's say if I, no joke, if there was a meteor about to, okay, let's say if I was visiting okay, let's say I was in a parallel universe of Earth and a meteor was hitting Earth, and I literally had like moments before it all ended. I would just pretty much just sit and realize that life, literally what an apocalypse means is life is telling you accept what the world is doing. Because really what the soul is rebelling against the world. You look at ancient traditions, right? The soul didn't even consider to be part of the world. Now the soul is so identified, shackled by its belief that it's just a materialistic entity. It's kind of like they've stripped. You know what it is? Imagine like in Christianity they say God is the Father. Now imagine there's a son and there's a father. Now imagine, right, throughout time, culture, and society, right, imagine there's a son standing in front of their father. The son loves the father, but then society suddenly puts a mask on the father. Suddenly puts a jacket on the father. Suddenly puts something where you suddenly realize like the son doesn't notice its father anymore. Do you understand? And it's kind of like beings are, even though for survival they have no choice as biological organisms, something is keeping us in this biological format. Okay? And it's not like I'm saying like, yo, it's like something like you eject like out of a plane, like an airplane. But it's more like understanding that, okay, nature is doing its thing. And it's also doing its thing as us, but we're also this additional viewer beside nature. So we are actually, sure, you could say the body was born. The body is the masterpiece of the planet, but the mind is the masterpiece of the skies. And I would end it off here. I think this is a good place to end it off. Thank you for listening. And the idea of how heaven has been humanized because humans had no choice. You know, there's a strange romance of a self-obsession with one's own existence in order to survive, but at the same time when one survives existentially as an object, they're like, why though? And then they understand that the mind, the faculty of consciousness, is actually here to process experience alongside something that is not itself. The reason others exist in this world is so we realize we're not just us. We're not just the mind. You know, for a long time I was like, yo, cosmos, you know, you created a world, like even from a religious standpoint, I was like, yo, God, you created a world so big, but the human beings just here for like 100 years and just so small. Like, who did you create all this world for? Right? And for the longest time I was thinking it's for, like for advanced beings and whatnot, but then I realized, right, that what human beings experience is the permission of their intelligence. So it's kind of like first thinking you're in a world, then being like, wait a minute, is something authorizing or live streaming this? Where's this force coming from? And when you wonder about the forces that move within you, you start mastering your movements in the outer realms. You know. I'm not kidding. This, if somebody was like Mr. Within, what's the secret of ability? I would say it's all in concentration. Any kid, any kid on this planet that learns concentration will be like anybody who learns both single pointed concentration and then multi pointed concentration, and then a type of concentration where it's the inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity, which means that just like a person enters a sauna, you can enter a non dual state of your own being and then step out of the sauna. You know, some people, if you become too dehumanized, the issue, excuse me, if you go too non-human, then the issue is because our intelligence adjusts and gets comfortable. It's going to get comfortable being dehumanized. Take it from someone who, for like a decade, I've been giving these talks, and I've been like, okay, I'm starting to see like how it's like sculpting me as a being throughout the years, right? And I'm seeing like, okay, what it's giving and what it's like, you know. But ultimately, the cool thing about this world is that it's all waiting for a decision. Why else is there a conscious mind here? I mean, think about it. What can the human mind do? The most well-known thing that the human mind is known for is to decide. Do you understand? That means to live in this world, or to be in this world, to even have it comes to a certain decision. You know, and it's a beautiful decision, because I'm like, sometimes sure I get overwhelmed, but there's moments where I'm like, yo, free roller coaster ride. I'm existing where before there was nothing here, right? It's as if like, okay, it's like might as well exist in like, as a creature in a reality rather than be nothing. Do you know? But then you're like, yo, why am I a creature in a reality though? And then you understand nothing is kind of like the entrance and the exit. It's kind of like the same doorway. So anyways, guys, if there's a chance that there's eternal beings here living here, then we are kind of like, we gotta like get over our how we're being noobs here, that thinking we're temporary. Do you know? And once we're done with our temporary noobery, do you know what I'm saying? Like with the right build poetically, which was all like mysticism and yoga and all that. The idea is that every creature is here to play the game, to see what they are and what the world is and how the world treats them. It's not, even though culturally the human mind compares itself, but at the same time it's here to see what it is. I mean, really, what else can we say about consciousness? It's an intelligence. It's a force that is getting to know itself. I think this is the best thing we can say about consciousness. That the whole point of it is to suddenly know something out of nowhere. Like, really, that's the purpose of life, to suddenly know that there's something here. And what's remarkable is so many creatures right now as I'm speaking, like how many children are being born, how many children are entering this world. There's how many people are dying right now, right? And it's all just passing through, and it's kind of weird because I feel like, I think we all feel like this, being alive on this planet, but it feels like we're gonna be like selected and suddenly leave at some point, right? So it's kind of like, I don't know, but it feels to me like attention is waiting for a permission that it can't give itself, and a permission that is beyond the world. Now, is it here to understand that it has to give the permission to itself? Or is it here to understand that the permission is not from it? Like, you could say a being has entered this world to understand that it's not a being. Just think about it. Think about how advanced of a teaching that would be. Imagine you're a being and you want to learn what not being is like. And the only way you can experience that is like by shaping yourself and then suddenly experiencing the shape go away, right? And this is the idea of like, really, where is the human mind rooted, right? If you have a belief that your consciousness is rooted in the brain, you will fear the brain based on you. It's just the brain's destiny will suggest your fear. Anything you identify with, anything happens to it, you will get emotional. Strangely, if you don't identify with your body, sure, you could say, you know, it's like the person didn't care, you know, for the like. Sure, they could be that view, but what I'm saying is ultimately, I think we have to keep everything in the spirit, in the spirit of the moment, as they say. And so what it is kind of like, you know, there's days where I notice my limitations. I notice my loneliness. Notice my incompleteness. I notice all the ways I failed. I notice all the ways I'm missing things, inefficiencies. Yet, one idea of efficiency, when I wake up in the day and I'm like, yo, in advanced civilization, though, regardless of all my problems, that idea is such a like that makes living worth it, right? The issue is the reason there's corruption, there's dishonor, there's disloyalty, there's evil, is because people don't have the honor to live for something better. The human being is not good or evil, it's a creature of attention. Where its attention goes, it behaves. You put it around wild animals, it becomes a wild animal. You put it around civilized human beings, it becomes a civilized human beings. You put it around extraterrestrials, it might even like elevate. Who knows? I mean, that's a the third one was a hypothetical situation. What I'm telling you, it's the idea is that the environment. Now, what I would say is a great soul, they would call it Mahatma in Vedanta. And of course, I wouldn't I consider my own greatness in the greatness of those who have walked before me. And if there's anything special about me, I have realized there's something special about the world. It's here. It's happening. I'm speaking into a microphone on a cold winter night in Canada. It happens and it goes forth. And as much as we fear it, as much as we think, but that's the cool thing. It goes forth, and here and there we have a say in what goes on. It's what's incredible, I would say, is that the human being has a distance between itself and its own idea. It can notice this distance, and this distance can be noticed before you actually have an idea. If somebody says to you, "Who are you?" before you actually give that answer, there is a space where there's nothing there yet. That space is actually the simplicity all these enlightened yogis are trying to bring people to. They're like, yo, you think God's out there? You think truth is like, you got to go through this like, hypothetical roller coaster. But once you realize the truth of this world is not about having the right thoughts per se, it's about seeing. I don't know how to say it. It's about, I would say it's more like the state. That means if you think you're a physical being, sure, you got to do something physical to change your reality. If you think you're a non-physical being, then what's something non-physical we do? Like they say the term thinking, which I'm not too fond of. The word thinking, I would say it's more like you're noticing stuff moving in your inner realms. And when we speak, we think we're like creating this stuff on the spot, but no, the rhythms are actually in the inner realms going on. So anyways, guys, I'm just 1 in 8 billion human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere, trying to say that, in this world, it's kind of like designed for what is given physically to be like taken away at the end. So it doesn't matter like, who you are. So this is why the ancients understood that really the joys of life come not from just what you physically have, but it comes from the type of character you have. And your character is based on what composure you want your inner life to have as a being. So your inner life is different. I'll give you an example. There's some people who, like, if you see, like, I don't know, I think Persians are known to be polite all around the world, and it's because in the culture they have this sort of surface level politeness, and the politeness is there. That's like the less you know the person, the more polite you are with them. The more you know the person, But of course, these are universals. We're human beings at the end of the day. That's what I realized. I was like, okay, if I was born in somewhere else, they tell me a different story. So really what spirituality is realizing you're not a story. And the body feels like the character in the story, so it's a very hard thing to wonder about. But really what I'm saying is, like, it's not like, people shouldn't think truth is like a jersey they're gonna find and wear and it's gonna fit perfectly. Truth is, believe it or not, it's a verb, it's not a noun. When we treat truth as a noun, we suffer because we see the noun change, we see the image change. But if we see truth as a noun, like, this is what fascinated me about religion. Why? Because it's as if, like, if the person doesn't see religion, what is their option? They're seeing a life that is lifeless, right? You look at an object, you're like, there's no fucking point what this object should be right here, right now. It's like, there's no fucking point that mountain's here. There's no freaking point that cloud's there. Right? It's all meaningless. But then you ask, what is the meaning? What is giving the meaning here? And so the human mind has to find one idea that connects all the ideas. And this idea usually is the idea of the world. But if you humanize, and the world is a place, and if you humanize the place, what do you get? You get a world that was no longer a world, and for the first time, you get a mind. Religion is that incredible moment in history where human beings stopped seeing, actually, a physical reality, and they started to find the common denominator, which was the inconceivable. That's the genius of monotheistic religion. And even though monotheism is like, certain people in monotheism, they look at people in India and polytheism, they're like, yo, these guys are worshiping multiple gods. Even monotheistic people don't understand that all ideological systems had to comment on the inconceivable. In all ideological systems, doesn't matter what, at some point the being was like, okay, I know stuff, then I don't know stuff. Oh, okay, divinity. You see? Because anything we know, its reason, it's human. Anything we don't know its reason, it's beyond human. So anything we understand ends up being human, and if human beings understand God, God becomes a human. The idea is descending to a human level, right? And the bizarre thing about, I would say, like, a monotheistic clue, because I treat religious books as codexes, really. And in religion, it says you're made in the image of the creator, but the creator has no image. It's like, you're like, what? I am made in the image of something that doesn't have an image, but I have an image, right? And so the being's like, wait a minute, does that mean my image is not an image? Do you see? What are the options? Either man is wrong, either the world is wrong. Do you know? It's one of these two. Either the world is wrong, either the that which is outside of man, call it world, call it God, call it nature's will. Either that's right or we're right. And if we identify as a body, we're the small, so we can't be right. But if we identify as a presence, how can we be wrong? We're happening the same time everything else is. So you see the mysteries of reality. They've reached a point where we got to wonder about their humanization and dehumanization, and I'll leave the viewers with that. Wonder about the Iron Man suit and the narratives you have been raised in. And when Mr.Within says, geometry is the next great language of languages, it's another way of saying beings are waking up from realizing that their limitations are shape. That means creatures thought their shape was their limitation, but it will get to a point where they will realize it's actually the shapeless that's limiting the shape. So it's like, what happens after, like, endless reincarnations? Oh yeah, the being's like, oh my god, it's not separate. So the person, what the being thought, it's like what one side of the coin, it's like an endlessly reincarnating being. Other side of the coin, it's all just being. It's a being that has never moved. Can you imagine being in a world that has never changed? Some people call that heaven. The original place that didn't change. You know, the thing, the bizarre thing about religion, I would say the most fascinating thing is that something that wasn't created. That is the miracle in the void. It showed itself to itself. The world showed itself to itself, and we are privileged to be on the shoulders of giants as it's doing it. You know, it's like right now people don't hear it, but the Milky Way galaxy is talking to the Andromeda galaxy. The worlds are whispering to one another, but they don't whisper through words. They whisper through civilizations rising and falling, the dialogues between worlds, really, the dialogues between planets and galaxies. We are their conversation. We are the conversation of the universal. They would say in Vedanta that man was made for the entertainment of the gods, but really the gods are entertaining themselves. Man is just there for the little ride, you know. Anyways, guys, you know, there's many ways to look at the world, wonder about the unknown. In my journeys and searches for spirituality and just really what's going on here, I have realized the unknown is the most incredible thing, because it's not just only the edge of knowledge, but it is where we're all headed. So for the human species to have an initiative to comprehend the unknown, that in itself is, as the Italians would say, miracolo. You know. Thanks for listening, guys. Rise, mankind, rise.